Welcome to the Friday edition of One's World, and I'm going to talk about holism today. I'll even put a spelling check in the crawl here so that you know how it's spelled. It really should be spelled W-H-O-L-I-S-M, like whole, because that's what it technically means. But they've eliminated the W and we talk about holism and holistic thinking and so forth. And I want to talk about that because my latest book is about holism in anthropology. So let's get started. Now, one of the ways that I can maybe sort of exemplify holism is by a couple of examples. First one I can think of is the use of electric motorbikes in Kunming in China, in the central part of the city. The city has got different zones as a central part, and then the circles move outward and so forth. And within the major central part of the city, you cannot ride a motorcycle that uses petrol. End of story. You have to use an electric vehicle. And the justification is that a lot of motorcycles, if you know anything about Asia, and it's not just China, I mean it's Vietnam and Cambodia and Myanmar and so forth, they're all just flooded with motorbikes, and they all churn out lots and lots of exhaust gases. And there are certain cities, Beijing's a great example, Shanghai's another one, where the air pollution is just horrible. There are days and weeks go by in Beijing where you can't see the sky. And it's not because of clouds, it's because of pollution. And that used to be the case in a lot of countries around the world. But China's solution right now, as opposed to, say, putting catalytic converters on all the motorbikes, as they did in California, and all the cars as well, to try to cut down on the smog in places like Los Angeles, instead they said, no, you're going to ride electric motorbikes and they have no emissions. Well, great. So problem solved. Not so fast. Where does the electricity come from? Well, it turns out that the bulk of the electricity in China, although it's changing, but the bulk of the electricity in China is made at coal-fired electrical plants in the countryside. All right, so they produce a lot of black smoke and pollution and so forth, but it's in the countryside. It's not in the city. So the cities are protected, and the countryside has to take the brunt of it, or they feel like, okay, it can be dispersed. But it still goes into the atmosphere. Doesn't matter whether it's being pumped in by motorbike exhaust or by coal-fired plants. It's still pollution, and it's still changing the climate one way or another. So that's what we would think of as holism. The question would be not, is your vehicle producing emissions that are hurting the environment, yes or no, but is your consumption of energy, whichever it's produced, is it producing more pollution in the air or not? And so you have to widen your vision. You take a bigger picture, and that's what we call holism. Right? It's that just because you're using an electric vehicle does not mean that you are not still contributing to the carbon woes of the world. You can go even further. Say, well, look, I'm going to drive a solar-powered car. The car is going to be powered by solar energy. There's panels on the roof of the car, and it's going to take in sunlight and turn it into electricity, which is going to be stored in a battery, and then the car is going to use that. Okay, well, that's curious. I mean, that's not using electricity from a source that is fossil fuels. It's it's renewable energy. It's solar power. But what about the construction of the solar energy, solar panels, and the construction of the car? How much fossil fuel or carbon emitting products are needed to make the car or to make the solar panels or whatever? Like, what is the totality? So we started off very small with just fossil fuel vehicles. Then we expanded to electrical production of whatever sort. Now we're going even further, and we're talking about the factory system. How much energy produced by fossil fuels is necessary to produce the car? How much fossil fuel is used by the workers getting to the factory? Do they go in electrical buses? Do they go in petrol consuming cars or whatever? Like, we can go bigger and bigger and bigger, and our holism is taking into account everything we possibly can. Okay, well, that's fossil fuels. Another one that my students often used to argue with me about. I had a lot of students back in particularly the 80s, less so after that, but in the 80s certainly, who were vegetarian. Not vegan, vegetarian. So they would eat some animal products, including milk and eggs, but they wouldn't eat meat. And the justification was that the milk didn't kill the animals, or the eggs didn't kill the animals, unless of course you realize that the egg is an animal in the making. but I leave that aside. But they said, well, I can eat milk and cheese, and I can still get my calcium and protein and whatnot from them, because I'm not killing animals. Well, wait a minute. Do cows just of their own free will, like, wake up one day and say, okay, here's my milk. I've got tons, I don't need it, it's all yours? No. Cows produce milk because they are bred, and they have to be bred constantly. They go dry after a while if they're not bred again and again and again. So you breed a cow, a dairy cow, because it's going to have a baby which wants the milk. It's going to start lactating, and when the baby is born, instead of allowing it to lactate, like to suck on the mother, it's taken away, and the mother is milked for a period of time and given certain hormones and various other things to keep her producing, and then when she starts going dry, they breed her again. And what happens to the calf? Well, if it's a female, they will let it grow and add to the stock, because herds need replenishment every so often. If it's a male, they take it off, they fatten it up and kill it. That's where veal comes from. That's what veal is. Veal is baby male cows who are not needed in the herd, and would just take up the milk that the dairy producers are trying to sell. And so you drink milk, you're killing baby calves. So you're still killing animals even though you're not, you're not eating the meat. Right? That's another holistic perspective. Like, take the big picture. And so in anthropology, we have a problem, because back in the 19th century, anthropology was pretty much convinced that all cultures followed a general pattern of evolution. And this goes back a long way, back to the speculations of various archaeologists that there was a progression of technologies, like the first humans banged stones together to make stone tools, and those banging rocks together got better and better and better until they started refining metals. And the first metal that they refined was copper, which they could alloy with tin and produce bronze. And then eventually they were able to smelt iron ore to get iron and alloy with carbon to make steel. So the hypothesis was that there was a Stone Age, and this was replaced with the Bronze Age, and that was replaced with the Iron Age, and that was a natural progression based on the development of technology, that as fires got hotter and hotter, more metals could be smelted, and they were better, like copper and tin together making bronze produced some pretty usable implements, including spears and swords and knives and so forth. But iron and steel were much stronger, much better, and so eventually they replaced the bronze tools. And in the 19th century, that was taken to be like universal. Like everywhere in the world, the Stone Age is replaced with the Bronze Age, is replaced with the Iron Age. Well, that's just not right. I mean, it's not right archaeologically, but it's not right anthropologically. And Franz Boas, who was a German geographer who went to the United States and became an anthropologist in the United States, realized that different cultures changed at different rates and in different ways, and were responsive to different phenomena, including changes in language, changes in culture, changes in kinship, marriage systems, governmental systems, and so forth. And so he proposed that anthropology should have at least 4 different aspects. One of them, the biology of humans, because when we change biologically, we can also change socially. Or we can change socially and change biologically. It works both ways. We can change linguistically. We can change in terms of our own history, that every culture is responsive to its own particular history. And that history may have to do with all kinds of variables, including the environment, DNA, what have you. Boas didn't know anything about DNA, but you get the idea. So he proposed that if you're going to study a culture, if that's going to be your unit of analysis, you need to look at it in 4 different ways. You need to look at the biology of the people, the history of the people, which includes archaeology, if they don't have a written history, the folklore of the people, like the oral literature as it's now called, and the language, and their culture. So 4 different perspectives. And that was a great revolution back at the beginning of the 20th century. And it almost immediately got forgotten, because each of those 4 fields is very technically demanding. If you're going to study human biology, then you end up studying evolution, fossils, DNA, of course, selective pressures, psychosocial pressures, whatever. So you can end up specializing in one particular area of biological anthropology, and all the rest of it goes out the window. And the same is true of archaeology. For a very long time, archaeologists had their own particular vision, and they would go to a particular place. Let's say they'd go to somewhere in New Mexico because they're interested in the cultures prior to the Pueblos. And they spend their whole lives studying these pre-Puebloan people and their pottery and whatnot. You know, like archaeologists love pottery. And linguists ask their own particular questions. Does the language that we speak influence the way we think? Does our vocabulary have an impact on consciousness and so forth? And then social anthropologists studied contemporary cultures. And it all is narrowed. Well, I don't exactly think of myself as a revolutionary, but I'm hoping to be sort of like Boaz reinvented or Boaz Redux, that I'm going back to studying cultures by looking at everything all together holistically. And I'm writing a book about it with my son. We've done a small video about that a few weeks ago, and we're going to be producing a whole series of videos eventually once we've written the textbook, which is mostly written, but it's still got a way to go. But we're trying to put things together holistically. Now here's my thought for the day. Can you think holistically? If you've got a problem, can you approach it holistically, or do you think of it in terms of one avenue, like you know, my spouse is angry at me at the moment. Well, can you think about that holistically, or do you just think, oh well, she's or he is mad because of my time spent away from home, so I'm going to look at that in terms of how I can get her or him to spend more time at home. Well, maybe that's not the solution. Think wider, think more open, think about what not just the problem is, but how it came about. It may not be just finding a solution. Just like when you get sick, let's say you've got a headache, okay? So what do? You take a pill because you've got a headache, and a pill will stop the headache. Well, what caused the headache in the first place? Maybe it was lack of sleep. Maybe it's poor diet. Maybe it's poor exercise. Who knows? But taking a pill just is a very narrow perspective. Think wider. Think about how you can solve the headache in other ways that don't involve just addressing the headache itself, but the cause of the headache. And that could be very complicated. Anyway, that's my holistic thinking for today. I hope you have a good weekend. And meanwhile, please tell your friends about my videos. Please like, please subscribe. I'm going to be back on Tuesday. I know I've got a recipe because I'm already on it. But I might talk about holism a little more next Friday. But anyway, have a great weekend.